Thanks everybody for joining the call today. I think Paul's run a couple of calls really going through our concept and what we're trying to do with iTWO Safe in bringing additional safety and security, especially in the times of COVID and as we move into a state of needing to have social distancing practices in place across most industries to ensure that we have the ability to make work sites safer. So, I think the last few calls that we've had have been really focused on the concept, where we're at, what we're trying to achieve. So there's been a lot of development work that's been happening now, and we're at the state that we can actually start demonstrating what this application looks like. So, I'm excited this morning to be able to sit down and go through especially some of the key features of what we're putting into the application as we get this ready for market. And the target date is still that this will be ready for release by the end of May, maybe earlier. It just depends on getting the bands and making sure that we have enough supply to meet the demand that we already currently have. So I'm not going to be sort of too long this morning, hopefully, but I really just want to run through a couple of things for you. Now, David, can you see my screen as well?
Yeah, it's come up with the agenda.
Yep. All right. So this morning, really, I just want to go through a few things to show you where we're at. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of a quick session over the architecture so you just sort of know how the application's been developed. I'll also go through what the bands are like so that people can have a good understanding around how they run. I'll go through the mobile application. Now, again, because we're in the times of everyone working from home, I'm only going to be playing a video of the mobile application. It was a little bit hard for us to have multiple people in one place and have the application showing the warnings and breaches coming up, but I've got them to prepare a video just to show what the application looks like and how it all goes. Then I'll go through the web portal, which is really the crux of everything that we're doing for adding users, for adding companies, for actually setting distance guidelines and a whole range of stuff that we go through. We'll look at some of the reporting requirements, and as I said, then I'll jump in and do a live demonstration as well. So we'll just kick in with this now. So in terms of the key architecture that we're dealing with, we've got this at a multi-level. So we have a web front end, which is our admin portal, super admin and admin levels, which is all very secured. So at present, we've got it so that it's hitting whitelisted IPs. If people have dynamic IPs, there's ways that we can work around that. But we've had security in mind to ensure that we're not passing any user information. The middle level around the Azure hosting is where that becomes very important for us as well. So we've got some web APIs dealing with the IoT, or sort of the rules-based interface and engine that we're dealing with, which is handling a lot of the data that pushes back to the application. To ensure that we're capturing and covering all of the information that goes across. There's a database that sits in the middle, which is really storing and categorizing everything that we have to make sure that it's there. And then we have a web API that really brings in all the information from the login screen. So we've sort of got it so that it's a two-level authentication, you could say almost, that we're dealing with multi-factors, going through to ensure that we have that security in place. From there, when we get down to the user level, there's a user mobile application, which basically gives the ability to log in, then link a device. As soon as the device is registered, then you'll be being tracked. As soon as it's deregistered, then you won't be tracked anymore. And you can also then just log out of the application as well if you want. But the goal of the application is really so that you can register and deregister the bands and ensure that then everything is tied back into the band from your mobile phone. The bands themselves then will be linked to the mobile application in a unique manner. so that that band will always be linked with the device that it's activated with. So if you have people that move, leave, whatever, that band can be repurposed and moved to somebody else. So it's not that it's a single fit band. It's, if you've got multiple people going on the work site, we suggest that you try and limit moving them around, because remember that the band is tied to the user ID, and that user ID is really what's going to drive any breaches or warnings that come through. And the user ID is the one that will identify who has been near somebody else in case of an infection or something where people need to just sort of control that. So the bands themselves, we've actually gone through and tried to make sure that we have something that is construction site fit for purpose. So construction quality clasps rather than just the clip clasp, so that you can ensure that it's not going to come off. It's sturdy, it's rugged. It is something that we went through a lot of rigor. We looked at about 10 different bands that we went through, just to ensure that we had one that was fit for purpose for construction. It also has a vibration warning, so the bands themselves will vibrate on your wrist, very similar to a Fitbit, so that you don't have to be looking at the application, you don't have to be looking for a visual warning. It will just give you a haptic sort of vibration on the wrist, so that you can ensure that as soon as it starts vibrating, you can sort of look around and see if there's somebody nearby and that you need to sort of go through and then impose further distance as you go through. And it will also have a visual warning. So we are looking at whether that's visual and audio. We were trying to stay away from audio just because it could be too annoying on site, but ultimately we wanted to have, again, multiple ways of people actually seeing if they were inside a warning or a breach area, so that we could actually come through and ensure that that was controlled. The mobile application itself, as I said, you basically install the application. It's going to be available on Android and iOS. At the moment, the Android version is up because there's still some discussions happening with Apple around the app getting up onto the App Store. So that's just being finalized. The Android version is available for download already. And people can get that on their phone. So it will basically give you a login screen. You then put in the company that you're working for and an employee ID that will be given to you. And then you'll be able to log in. Now, once you log in, you're not going to be registered at that point. So then you have to go in and add the device, and that device will actually go through and give you then your unique identification between band and mobile application. And then we have a whole bunch of things that sit within the app where we can have the distancing guidelines, safety tips, or anything else like that that's coming through. Sorry, there's just something coming up here. Billy, are you watching the chat screen?
Yep, I'm keeping an eye on it. And yep. We've just got a message from Dave just saying that he has an Apple iPhone and he's downloaded the app.
Yes, yep. So the iPhone app was on the store. Apple have just put a pause on it, so it's not on the store at the moment. So if you went there a week ago, it was there. They just wanted to run another check over the code. So last week you could have downloaded it. This week it'll be back up in the next day or two. So as soon as we get into the web portal, there's a couple of things that and I'll go through these when I go through the demonstration as well, but a couple of things just to be aware of. Multi-level as well, so at super admin level is where we go through and you can set up different company requirements. Now, the key thing about setting up different company requirements is this app is designed to run over Azure, and actually so that we can handle all of the hosting for you in terms of that Azure environment. But if for some reason you decide that you want to host this yourself, we have a API URL where if you've got your own VMs or your own portal that you want to tap into, then we have the ability to actually go in and tap into that specific API URL. Also have the ability then to go in and categorize bands, because we thought that it was going to be important to actually group bands. So much like many other applications do, so specific companies can have a specific band code. So that would come under the sort of the UUIDs. So that UUID will then allow you to ensure that people specific to your company are the ones that are coming on board. And we also have the ability then to also, as soon as there's an update with the application, basically submit that application and ensure that people are going to go through and run through any updates to the application on the mobile that they need to go through. From an admin level, this is really where we start controlling all of the company or the people within a company who are on site. Now we have geo-referencing as part of this. Now it's only XY through BLE at the moment. We're looking at a UWB option as well, where we can have X, Y, and Z. But if you don't want geo-referencing, you have the ability to turn geo-referencing off. You also have the ability to go through and look at how you set the different zone configuration for what you see as safe practices. And I'll go through when I do the demonstration and show how all of this works. Just really providing you with that ability to say, on our site, we want to have distances, or a breach is 0 to 1 meters and a warning is 1 to 3 meters, 1 to 2 meters, whatever that may be. We also have a, when you go into the add users, you can add individual users, or you can do a bulk upload. So there's a CSV upload option where you can actually just grab a CSV file of all the users that you want to add, and then that will automatically add all of those users in. Once you're within the screen, you also then have the ability that you can ensure that a user is active or deactivated. So if you have people that have left the site no longer with the organization, you can actually go through and deactivate them from the app yourself, so that they're not actually counted towards your numbers anymore as you're going through. Configurable warnings and safety tips, as I said, and I said I'll show all of this as we go through. And those configurable warnings and safety tips are just really an added value, so that if you have specific requirements on site, you can ensure that staff are actually going in and can review anything that you have or that you want to display with them. So as part of that, it gives us the ability that, for example, if there's a site note or something that you want to push out for the day, we can go in and put in a safety tip, or we can put in a guideline for that particular day, and it will then be available on the app as soon as you've sort of gone and added that, because it will go and resync back to the applications when people start them up again. And that way we can ensure people are getting up-to-date information around all of these sort of distancing guidelines or safety tips for the site. We then move into the reporting framework, and that sort of reporting we've tried to keep fairly simple. So you'll get a high-level dashboard which looks at the total number of users that are active at any point in time, total number of devices that are turned on, logged in users. It'll give you latest alerts. It will give you today's alerts, today's warnings, and total breaches over the site. So this is just a very high level view that can go in. From there, we can actually then have a couple of dashboards where we can actually start looking at daily, weekly, monthly reporting on number of breaches versus number of warnings, and have that displayed in multiple manners. The other thing that we have now available is, because we have geo-referencing, is that we have a heat map. So this will give the ability to actually highlight on the map where you have hotspots, and those hotspots will then be able to look at to say, is this an issue with site movement? Is it an issue with how we've structured working and our schedule for working at the moment? And what do we need to do to ensure that people can clear those areas? You know, I just thought that it was really important as we're going through this, and especially if we're going to have geo-referencing and geolocation, that we had the ability to ensure that we could use that information for making better decisions on site. So that way, if you have a walkway that happens to be quite narrow, but it's a busy thoroughfare for main aspects of the site, it will provide us the ability to ensure that we identify those hotspots and then look at ways of resolving those, whether that's moving traffic into another direction, or whether it's actually looking at clearing up or widening walkways as we can. So it's just another way that we can use that information through a heat map on geolocation. So we can then start pulling up reports on the tag IDs. Again, we're not bringing any personal information into reporting. The personal information would only be required as we went through and had a look at if there was anyone that had become infected, or if there was something that required people to understand who had been near each other. So what we have is use statistics, so a warning breach sort of overall summary where it looks at every tag ID and how many breaches and how many warnings they've had on a particular timeline. We also then have a full list of every activity that's coming out. So it will show every warning and every breach from every tag to tag that has happened on site. And again, you can control that over a date range. So if somebody had become infected and they'd been on site for 4 days, you can actually scroll to that 4-day date range and have a look and ensure that you've captured every tag that that person has come in contact with. So then you can start filtering down to that tag ID and then just looking at everybody that was associated with them and then provide information to them that they need to isolate for a period of time. All right, so that's all from just doing a high-level overview. So I'll jump into the number one, the application video to start off with, and then I'll go on to the web portal so you can actually see that live with where we're at. And then when I'm finished, we'll be able to have some questions around what it is. So just bear with me while I just start this video. All right, so this is the login screen as we jump onto the application. What it then does is it comes in, provides you your login screen. You hit the login, go into your login details, put in your company name, employee ID, which will be provided to you. As you go in, you'll see that there's no device connected at the moment, but it does sort of give you everything. You click on the add device, it will bring up every device that's around or within the proximity of that. It asks you if you want to connect this app. If you've selected the wrong one, you can go no. You know, if there's multiple apps that are around, it does show you your ID. So you can just validate the ID is correct. And once you've done it, it'll go in and log you in. So once you've logged in, you can see that you're automatically getting alerts that if you're in a warning area, it comes up and shows you a yellow screen. It also does a constant scan. It runs in the background, so it doesn't have to be active all the time. That's why we have the bands, so the app can run in the background and the bands will do that for you. You can get a list of all of the alerts, so you can see any alert that you've been in contact with or any ID that you've been in contact with that you're going through. So you can actually scroll through and actually see how many warnings that you've had or how many breaches you've had over that day and actually start tracking through them. And that's just a way that we can ensure that you can do some self-safety as well. You'll know if somebody that you're working with, you'll be able to actually go through and say, oh, well, band, you're using band 113. Yes, and I know we're working together, so those alerts are always going to be there. But it just gives us that ability to ensure that we're actually being able to monitor and self-track that as we're going through as well. You can go in and have a look at your device settings. So you can go in and actually pick up what your device ID is, your device number, which is a 4-letter number, and going through. Now, the other thing is that if you move too far away from band to mobile, you will get that connection error. So it will actually warn you that you're moving away from your phone and start giving it to you. From there, as I said, we can jump in and actually go in and look at the distancing guidelines. So if you've got distancing guidelines that have been set up by the organization and controlled from the application, it will go through and actually show you those and safety tips as well. So you can ensure that people are going in. That's just, I said, a really good way for us actually controlling some of the communication on site and making sure that you can get the latest information of anything that's going through. At the moment, we've got this linked in so that, you know, we've got our links that are sitting here, so you can go and get further information around M2 Cloud and the thing, but we can add other links into here as well. So if you've got company information, if you've got a safety or a website that people need to go to, we can ensure that they've done that. And once you're finished, you can go through and hit the disconnect device, go yes. As soon as you've done that, you're not being tracked on site anymore. So as soon as that's disconnected, then you're done. And then you can actually go through and sort of log out of the device if you want, just so that it's not running in the background anymore. So that's just a quick overview of the interface and the way that the application is running. So the next thing that I'll do is we'll now just jump in and have a look at the actual application itself. So I said the first thing that you're going to get is you'll log in. You will actually get this login screen so that you can go in and add your details. Now, rather than be going in and logging in all the time, I've actually got that set up. So the first screen, which I said is sort of that super admin level. This is where we have different companies and you can have sort of all of the requirements that we're dealing with in terms of those companies. So quite easily, you know, we can go in and we can just go in and add a client. It's asking you for a company name. It's asking you for a company contact. It's asking you for an email address. Then we go through, if we're using our iTWO API URL, it'll go there. If you're using a company one or one that you've already got set up, it will go in. And then we can go through and put in your band IDs so that we actually understand which group of bands that you're going to be using. And you can allocate the number of users that are going to be going through that as well. So that's just our way of actually going through. As soon as that's set up, you're going to receive an email. And that email will be the only way you'll have to verify that, then reset your password. That's the only way that you'll be able to actually go through and manage that. From within this, companies can be made active or inactive. So if there's companies where we need to actually ensure or that they're no longer doing activities or a project's finished or whatever, we can go through and start deactivating those as we go through in terms of people that are working on particular projects for us. As I said, if there is an update that's required throughout the application, so we have our Android and we have our iOS versions. We say what the minimum version is, what the maximum version is, threshold. And if there's an update that you want to do, we can go submit and we can start to then drive that there is an update that's available and it'll push out that needs to be updated on everybody's application to come back onto the site, basically. It's just if there's any major changes that we're doing to the architecture within inside the application to ensure that that can be pushed out across all devices. In terms of the admin level, and this is sort of really the crux of it when we're getting in. So this is where we have the ability to actually start managing and tracking what's happening through site activities and individual users on site. So number one, we have user management. So our user management is actually where we can have all of the users that we're dealing with on site listed out. It will have the employee ID. As I said, that may be a particular employee ID that everybody has, or it can just be a list that you come up with and then allocate to people as a unique identifier. We were talking about the ability to do this with email as well. Again, as soon as you have an email, it is additional personal information, and we're just trying to ensure that site security or around personal information being shared isn't really available, which is why we thought going through an employee ID was a much better way to do that. As I said, when you go to add user, you've got a couple of things that you can do. You can go through and add an individual user where you put their username, their employee ID. If you are allocating the beacons, so you're actually saying this is the beacon that you're going to have, you can even go through and add what that beacon ID is going to be. But as soon as they register, that beacon ID will be picked up and pushed back to the application as well. So it will automatically be reported back to them. But it just allows us that ability that if you want to predefine all of those, you can actually go through and just type in what the beacon IDs are. And as I said, the other option that we have is doing a bulk up, a CSV upload, so that people can actually, within an organisation, list out all of the people that are going to be on site, because you don't want to be going through and adding them one at a time. You just really have that same information, username, employee ID is all we need, and it can go through and do a bulk upload so that everybody is added. As I said, once people are in there, if you need to, you can make them, you can deactivate people if you need to. So as you have people on site that may have left the organisation, then it gives you the ability to actually ensure that you're turning those off as well. At any time, if there's things that change, you can then just go in and click on any one of these, and then you can look at who the person is, what is their employee ID, which operating system they're on, and what is their device name, and it will give them the beacon ID if it's been applied as well, right? So we can actually go through at any time and see which operating system, which ID people, particular people have as part of that as well. All right, so in terms of, whoops, sorry, I've gone to the wrong site. Bear with me 1 second. Seems to be crashing a little bit now on me. Might just have to give me, this is always the problem with live demos. We always manage to break something as we go through. I might just log back in, sorry guys. Just bear with me while I do a refresh on it and see if I can hit it that way. I'm just going to relog back in, sorry everybody.
Hi Andrew, it's Paul here. Can you hear me at all?
Yep, I can hear you, Paul.
Hi everyone. Sorry, it's Paul Laycock. I was a bit held up this morning getting into the Zoom meeting. So I just wanted to thank everybody for coming along and joining the webinar today. We're very, very excited that we're down to basically the last few hours of the finalised testing and doing some field testing. But it's been a very, very exciting time for us all, and the level of inquiry has just been fantastic to look at getting people back on the work sites, or in some countries where they're only just trying to get work sites back up and running. It's great to be able to be a part of helping everybody, I guess, the economy, but also trying our best to keep people as safe as we can. So looks like Andrew's back where he's going. I'll hand back over to Andrew.
Thanks, Paul. It's always good to have someone jump in when I'm just fixing a couple of technical issues as we go through. All right, so the next area is around the configuration. So as I said, there's a few things around configuration that become quite important. As I said, we're grouping bands, so we can have particular bands per company or bands per site, so that actually controls the way that people are dealing with them. I said we didn't really want to go through and just have one specific band for everybody, ID, so we've actually broken those up so that we can have unique band identifications per company or per site as we go through. And as I said, we've got the user location, so if you want geolocation so that you can do heat maps, then we have that available. But if you don't want to be doing anything around geolocation tracking, as I said, in this instance, because it's BLE in a XY coordinate, then you can turn that off. The zone settings. So as I said, we have the ability to actually come in now and actually set what those zone ranges are. So if you classify a breach as 0 to 1 metre, you can do that. If that breach is actually 1.5 metres, you just got to come in here. We can then go through and say that that's 1.5 metres. Submit that. It's actually going to save that detail, and then suddenly now our breach zone is at 1.5 meters. And then if the warning zone was 1.5 to 3 meters, we can just come in 1.5 to 3 meters and submit that. And what that does is, as soon as that's done, it will basically push that out to every application that's dealing with, because it's actually got an active link back into everything that we're dealing with. And it just allows us that ability to, on site, to actually specify what we classify as a warning and a breach within the safe distances that we're dealing with. Now, as I was showing before, the other thing that we have is then the ability to have distancing guidelines and safety tips for the work site. So if you have particular distancing guidelines or things that you want people to understand as part of your distancing guidelines, they can all be basically pre-programmed here. It can happen daily, as I said, because it's a live link and push that's going through. As soon as we're updating these, then it's going to push it back out to the application. So this allows you then to basically have all of these sites. You can go through and add a new tip. So I can go through and add a new tip, and that guideline can be that ensure a distance of 1.5 meters is maintained. Whoops, my bad typing, bear with me. And now that is a new tip. So I'll save that. As soon as I've saved it, then that's actually going to push out when people actually are inside the application. So I said it's just a really good way of ensuring that people can get any site information, any safety information or distancing guideline regulations that we have that may change, and have those available on the application. And then I said, and that's exactly the same for the safety tips, so that people can actually jump in with those safety tips. If you have particular things, there's a certain zone on the site where there's an issue at the moment. There's activities where you don't want people doing them at that period in time. We can actually go through and add these safety tips in so that people are getting up-to-date information and ensure that they're actually sort of being managed and tracked at that point in time. So I said, it's just an additional feature that we thought was important to ensure that we're getting, you know, not just a beep or a buzz, but people can actually jump in and have a look and see if there is guidelines or safety requirements for the site that day that they need to be cognizant of as we go through. I'll jump into the reports before I go to the dashboard. So we're trying to keep the reports sort of fairly simple at the moment in terms of what we're looking at. But, you know, these again are quite flexible and we can go through. So number one, we can go through and set date ranges so that we're actually looking at, I said, this becomes important when we're dealing with if there has been an infection or there's something that we actually need to go through and look at what it is. Like everything, we have the ability to start expanding the length of the search that we're going through, but we also have multiple report types that we're dealing with at the moment. So at the moment, I can have a look at a warning breach report. So the warning breach report, which is the one that I'm on, so it's going to say everything that's a breach. It's looking at this tag to this tag and at this time, right? So that's the only information that we're doing. We are getting the geolocation, as I said, and if that's turned on, we have the ability that we can hyperlink back to where that location was, just to see if it's in one of our hotspots that we're going through. But really, this is just about tracking all of those breaches and warnings. Like everything, if you have wanted to do a search, so I can search on a tag ID, I can search on it if it's a breach or a warning. So I can say here, show me your warnings, and it will go through and then just show me a warning rather than a breach. So it's fully searchable, so that I can actually just go through and start getting that information as we go through, right? The same on any tag IDs that I want to go through and search on. So I can actually search on anything where it's a particular tag ID number, and then it will just show me everything that's a breach across those tags. From that, I also have a warning breach count. So this will give me then every tag ID that's on site, and will then start showing me the number of breaches and the number of warnings that they have had over, again, a particular date stamp that we want to go through. So I can go through and set my date range from to, submit that. It will go through and then it'll say for this period or this week, this is all the tags that I've had on site, and this is the number of breaches and the number of warnings that they've had. Again, it's only down to the tag ID, so there's no personal information that's coming through. It just allows us that ability to actually still manage and track and start utilising this data so that we can see if we're reducing the number of breaches and warnings on site through particular activities that we do. And then the other thing that we have is you can then start validating all of the tags that you have on site. So if you want to see if tags are being registered or deregistered, so that you can ensure that people on site are using registered applications, we can actually go through and track down to the ID level when they registered and when they deregistered their applications. Right? And I said, and this is only to ensure that they've had usage on site as they're there, or to see if anybody's had, or anyone that we know has been on site hasn't had that tag registered for a period of time. So it just allows us to actually go through and make sure that we've got, well, we are registering all the tags that we should be as they are. And any of these, we can always then go through and download those reports into, again, CSV format, so that we can start utilising that and manipulating it for further information as we go through. From a dashboard or reporting level, as I said, what we have at the moment is we can see the total number of users that are registered, we can see the total number of devices, and we can see logged in users. So it will give us the date and time of our latest alerts. It will tell us how many breaches we've had today, how many warnings we've had today, total breaches that we've had, and total warnings that we've had over a project. It will then start going into our alert count. Now, again, at the moment I'm showing a day. I can say, show me a week, and make that week last week's period of time. And then it will go through and start showing me the number of breaches and the number of warnings that I've had over that particular week. And that's just the way that, again, we can start filtering it, we can start looking at trends, and we can start just sort of getting a high level overview of how many breaches and warnings we're having on site, to ensure that we control that as we're going through. For the same thing, we can actually go through and start looking at any single day with particular hot times when we're getting sort of all of these areas where people are going through and getting a high number of breaches. So we could turn around and say, oh, well, at 12 o'clock, we get a high number of warnings or a high number of breaches. Maybe that's because it's when lunch break happens. How do we have to control that? Do we start then staggering lunch breaks, or what do we need to do? So I can actually start giving us the breakdown on a day-to-day basis. All of these, they are scrollable as well, so I can make them bigger or smaller as I need to, just with a quick zoom. So I can start then going into particular areas and actually seeing where they are. The other one that we've got now is actually the heat map. I said at the moment, because everybody's working in very different areas, our heat map is quite large, because we've got a couple of warnings that sit over here and some that sit in another location. With all of these, we can just go in and scroll in with these though, so I can actually start scrolling, panning and zooming around and actually having a look at that on site. It will then start showing me, as I said, all of those hotspots that I'm dealing with, and I can start delving into those hotspots and seeing what's causing those, or is there something that we need to do, or do we send someone out there to see if there's any remedial action that we need to take. These are customizable. At the moment, the customizations are just pre-configured in the application, so we're looking at whether we can make that so that it's user configurable. But that's more just about, I've got my heat map here, I can then go and turn my heat map off just to see whether it's actually sitting, turn it back on, and then just to give me my validation. I can change different gradient levels and change the radiuses that I'm working with in terms of what drives that heat map as well. So it's just another way that we can start really looking at what's happening on site and just working with those sort of key areas around bottlenecks on site that are causing warnings and breaches, to ensure that we actually can go through and control that as part of what we're dealing with. So I said, guys, you know, that's just a really, really quick and high level overview of the application, how the application runs and links into the bands, and then the way that we've got user management, company configuration and reporting and dashboards to ensure that this is available to everybody that's required to increase safety on the work site. So Billy, I will probably stop sharing now, and I'm sure that there's a bunch of questions. So I don't know if you have those questions available.
I'm just looking at the chat and the Q&A, and there aren't any questions in there for right now.
Good.
If anyone does have any, please enter them into the chat or into the Q&A section. There were some from Matt Hutchins and from Chad, but I think Paul said we might take those offline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, perfect.
Oh, actually, there's one. Sorry, there's one coming through from Henry Coombs. 1 second. He just says he's got a question. So I'll just mute myself.
Andrew.
Sorry, Henry, I'm having real trouble hearing you.
Sorry, Andrew, it's Paul here. Can you?
Yep, I can hear you, Paul.
Okay. Hey, everyone, I was just thanking Andrew for doing a great job. We're just waiting for a few questions to come through and we can answer those questions. But one of the things we've really targeted with this is making sure we don't get into any issues with personal information and personal data. We've seen the reaction to some of the community apps that the government has worked through. So our approach is very, very different to what they're doing. We're looking at a preventative approach, and we're looking at an approach that helps us stay safe, I guess, into the future. It's not about what's happening necessarily right now today. And we know in those areas that people's their data and their information is critical. So we're definitely trying to manage that situation and working with unions and health and safety people around different types of sites. We're confident that we've actually met all those standards, and we're talking to those people, and as soon as we meet with someone and run through how we're doing everything, they're very, very relaxed about how that data is being handled. And of course, because we own the IP, we can adjust things if there's certain things required to meet standards. The other major difference, I know, is if you look at a lot of the community apps, they're talking about breaching for 15 minutes before it will actually record a breach. And that's because obviously the amount of data that would happen in the community would just be absolutely massive. But a 15-minute breach is no use in a workplace. We need to know if people are getting into too much contact, etc. One of the questions that was raised to me: what if we got a team of guys for a day and they have to be carting materials, and because of the weight restrictions, etc., they have to be working closer than 2 meters? We can actually go in and set that up so those people don't necessarily breach, or we can just have it on file that we know that they're doing that for the day, so those breaches can be recorded. Because it's still important that I believe that we record those breaches, but it becomes an acceptable breach, and we know how to manage that. But in those cases, we may want to implement some better sanitisation and some etc., whatever we need to for health reasons on site. So, Andrew, there's a few questions there, so I'll sit back now and see if you want to answer those.
Yeah, well, I've got one that I've got. So I think Henry wants to ask a question in a minute, which we can unmute him in a second. But Ruby, and hi Ruby, glad you could make it this morning after we only spoke yesterday. So can you explain, are there ways to distinguish between different sites under one company admin? So very glad that you brought that up, because that was a question that we discussed last week. and something that hadn't originally been considered. So I raised that with the development team last week. So they have said, yes, we will be able to do it. The problem is they hadn't thought about it when they first done it. So it is basically going to be, we're getting everything else done, and then it will be broken up so that we'll be able to actually add different sites under a company admin. At the moment, if we don't have it, we're going to actually handle that from the admin portal. So there's a way that we can do that just by putting company-site and then giving people control to everything that sits under that particular company. But as we move into the next iteration, which again, they'll be working on this week still, we will have the ability to actually distinguish multiple sites under a single company. Now, Henry Coombs had a question that he wanted to ask. Billy, can you unmute Henry, or do I need to do that?
Because you're the host, Andrew, I believe you'll need to do it. If you go across to attendees,
yeah, that's all right.
There may be the option to manually just unmute Henry himself. And there's also just another question there when you're ready.
Yep. All right, Henry, you should be unmuted.
Firstly, Henry forwarded me the invite. It's Amar, not Henry.
Oh, how are you, Amar?
I was wondering, well, Henry. First of all, guys, fantastic. We've been waiting, for a few weeks to see this thing in action, and then I'll be, you haven't let us down. And the fact is, it's 1:45 in the morning, and I'm glad I stayed up to see it because, we've been waiting to see the actual delivery of the technology. A question I have is with regards to the wristband, the BLE device. I understand it's USB chargeable. Is that can be charged by USB, or could you confirm that, please?
Oh, now what was that? Sorry, Amar.
So BLE device.
Yep.
It's chargeable USB.
Yep.
It is okay. Fantastic.
Yep.
And the only other question I have is the API URL you're referring to. If someone wants to host the app locally or on their virtual servers, will it still be routed through our Azure entity?
No,
it won't be.
It will basically then do all of the admin from their site. So there'll be certain things that we still need to configure as part of that, but the routing of everything, of all data, then goes to their site. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
All right, so there was a couple of other questions I think that had come in, so just let me scroll down and see if I've got those. So there was one from Ben that said, if not all staff or public have the wearable device, does it link to the government COVID Safe app? No, there's no link between the government Safe app and what we've developed. We're using a totally different technology to do that. The government Safe app is, as I said, they have very different requirements, 15 minutes before a breach is actually identified and a whole range of things. They've also would not give anybody access to linking into that app from another app. So it is really, that's why we're saying we're trying to control this on the worksite and ensure that everybody has it. Another one from Ruby. Can you confirm if you change the warning or breach distance on the portal that it will sync both phone applications and wristbands? Either wristbands will vibrate at any distance we put in. Yes, that is exactly what's going to happen. So basically the reason that we have that is you set it up and it's set up so that there is a sync between the application and the portal, and then between the application and the band. So as soon as you're updating that information, that sync will occur, and then everybody will have the new distance guidelines in place. Can you see any questions that I've missed, Billy?
No, I think that about covers it, Andrew. Yep, no, I can't see any further questions.
All right. I don't know if there's any other questions, but if anyone has them, I mean, I can probably unmute people otherwise. Is there a way that I can unmute everybody, Billy?
I think there should be an unmute all option. If not, it might just be set up that it's individual.
Yeah.
just while Andrew works through and does that, I just want to let people know that we will be releasing all the final pricing. And for all the companies who have entered into the letter of intent to purchase, you'll be happy to know that we've actually been able to reduce the pricing based upon the demand, and it's been able to bring our manufacturing costs and everything down. So we're excited to work to release that final pricing. Purchasing up to 50 units will be, or sorry, up to 100 units will be available directly online, and for any proposals above 100 units for corporate use will be available by quotation and a presentation to make sure that we set it up to meet exactly what's required. So all this information will be going live, I believe, by Monday, and we should be able to move forward from there. So back to you, Andrew.
That's okay. I was just going through and unmuting everybody, or allowing everybody to talk. I think some people are muted, they can unmute themselves as well, but I'm just going through and allowing everybody to talk. I think when I allow them to talk, they're still muted.
Gents, can we have the recording of this session?
Was it recorded, Billy, or was that my job?
Yeah, no, it's recording automatically. So if you and Paul are happy, I can get this up on our YouTube. That's your call to make. But yep, we can make that available.
No, I'm happy for that to be put up.
Yep, no problem. I'll upload it to YouTube, and it'll be sent to everyone who registered.
Thank you.
So everybody should have the ability to talk now. So if there is any other questions, I'm happy to take them rather than people putting them in the QA. I'll just check the QA one more time.
Yeah, Andrew, it's Gus.
Yep.
Just the question I had there for is there still going to be a pendant option, which for those that didn't want to have the wristband?
Do you know, Paul? I know that we were talking about it, but I haven't seen the latest one from that vendor.
Yes, we will be. We'll be having a pendant, and we're even looking at a card mechanism that could go into hard hats, etc. But to get the product into the marketplace, we've decided to just focus on getting the band out first, and then we'll be looking at that, the pendant, and also a card option. So we've even got people in the entertainment field that are looking at trying to implement this, like movie theatres, etc., and restaurants. A card that people could put into their top pocket, or a pendant that could be attached, could be used. So a lot of people are trying to use this for their getting their businesses back and up and running as a plan to the government, and so they can meet the minimum requirements, and hopefully be able to show that they can meet those standards, but they can also increase those standards. So therefore, rather than only having 10 people in a restaurant, which we know would be pretty difficult to run profitably, we may be able to get those numbers up higher if we can show that there's management in place and safety aspects being managed.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Is there any other questions that anybody has before we wrap up for the day? And again, if you have questions on the back end of this that you thought you should have raised in the session, please feel free to reach out to us. Our job is, we're here to help. We're very excited about the application, what we're pulling together in terms of a product that is really going to assist and make construction sites safer. This is, as we were saying, the first iteration of what we're going through. We actually want to really start expanding this to not just COVID, but to other applications around site safety as we go as well, controlling location-based scheduling, controlling material movement, and a whole range of other things. But we just felt that it was important to get this to market as accurately and as quickly as we can, to ensure that we can deal with the current crisis and situation we're in, where people need to actually invoke social distancing as part of a workplace requirement.
And Andrew, I'd like to add to that. The technology, we're moving forward to work out how to connect it through to all our M2 technology.
Yeah.
making sure all that scheduling can be handled. But we're hoping to be able to take this data and make it applicable to when we're even doing designs and buildings and putting the building together at the modelling level, and especially in manufacturing and looking at manufacturing floors, etc. Making sure that we can, whilst designing, we can understand how people are going to be in that environment. So if we encounter such things in the future, we can better manage it and have plans in place beforehand. And so working with M2 and iTWO is going to be critical within our ROB technology, and also working with Autodesk with things like M360, etc., is going to be critical as well. So being in the position we are in the industry, we know that we can combine all these areas together and make right from our design right through to managing the properties or managing the asset is going to be a lot easier as we combine these technologies through. So I think on that note, I thank Andrew and Billy for preparing. I want to thank everybody for attending, especially the people around the world who have logged on at 1 o'clock in the morning. Thank you for having a look at the technology. We look forward to working with everybody. We will get some notification out. We'll be going onto the market so people can actually start purchasing and get in line on the manufacturing outputs. So we're working on the manufacturing schedules as we speak, and planning that based around where we need the products and where we need it around the world. So it was very exciting times for everybody in this sense, but exciting because we really believe we can make a difference and help people get back to work safely and keep our economy going and kickstart it again. So thank everyone for their time. Take care, stay safe, and we look forward to talking or seeing you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Good to see you
Thank
again.
you, everyone.